Let's take a look at some more correlations. This is something that gets spoken about a lot. What happens to blocks when players play more minutes? Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and Twister. We saw Twister. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We're available on all platforms. I'd like some thumbs and bangs and comments and double bangs. I will be back live soon. Next week, I'll be back, all things going well, to report on things live as they are happening. But this is a pre-recorded show. I'm recording it on July the 4th. So there you go. It's all about blocks. We did a correlation show, and I don't know when it came out. I know it comes out before this one, but talking about the impact of usage and efficiency, and the idea that if you have to do more, if your usage goes up, you become less efficient. And we sort of proved that as a general rule that is true, except if you are an absolute stud, a fantasy stud, the first round player, a second round player. Usually those guys, it's not as big of an impact, or it's not an impact. But we did show that, like, for other sort of players, as they ramp up usage, their efficiency drops. One of the other things, and I do a lot of correlation research through my work, and one of the things that was brought up by me many times, and someone said, hey, we should do something on this, is talk about blocks, because the general prevailing principle with blocks is that obviously they're a category that has weird distribution through an NBA data set, but the idea is, I might as well just put it up on the screen, the hypothesis that we're going with here on blocks is that as players play more minutes, their block rate decreases. Now, I don't mean their total blocks, because obviously if you played 10 minutes and you played 25 minutes, you've just got way more opportunity to block shots. Your raw block numbers will rise. I'm talking about block rate, block percentage, how many shots that you block based on the amount of time you're on the court, right? That idea of the block rate. It's a rate stat. It's not a total stat. It's not a cumulative stat. The idea being, and this is what I've hypothesized with it before, is that as a player plays more, they attempt, their role becomes more important on the team, they become smarter with defense, they're not just dumb and stupid and just trying to block everything out of the gym, that as they try to avoid dumb fouls, because they're more important to the team, and they know that, hey, you've got to play 30 minutes tonight, not 15, that they attempt and they execute fewer blocks. That's the hypothesis. As a player plays more, the player tries to stay out of foul trouble, the player plays smarter defense without going for highlight blocks, therefore block rate should drop. The other part of this that I think is important to look at is as a player ages, athleticism dips. We know this. Your peak athleticism is probably like 22, 21, whatever it is. You're still very athletic, obviously, and then your athleticism starts to decline 28, 29, whatever it is, right? There's declines and there's sharp drop-offs in the 30s. But usually your absolute most athletic, you're around 20. Like, that's your most athletic jumping-wise and speed of reaction, all that sort of stuff. So the thought process has been that the younger you are, the more you're able to block shots. And as you get older, your block rate drops because you're not as active. You're not as springy. You can't come out of nowhere to block a shot from the sky. They're the two sort of hypotheses we've got here. That more minutes lead to a lower block rate. The older you get, the lower the block rate. I'm using the data from dunks and threes to get block rate here, and we had 288 players who played games in 4 consecutive seasons, from the 21-22 season to the 24-25 season, and we tested the block percentage against minutes per game and against the age as per the data on dunks and threes. So that's exactly what we got into. Now, I don't know, how do you think this is going to go? Because last time we did the usage and efficiency, we had our hypothesis, we put it out there of what we thought would happen, and as a general rule, it proved true. This one is something that, again, why I do this work and why I do this data and why I do this analysis. Is it going to be perfectly executed? No. I'm not like a deep research statistician doing 6 months of work on this stuff. But I think that the general rule or the general idea is important. It's important to prove things wrong. You know that I've proven things wrong, like contract years. You know that I've proven things wrong in the past, like sophomore slumps or revenge games, right? These prevailing narratives that are out there. This is one that I know the answer because I've done the data, but I came into this and you see my expectation. The player plays more, they try to stay out of foul trouble, their block rate drops. The player gets older, their block rate drops. So I guess let's just see. Let's see how it goes. Let's see what it looks like. It is World Brain Day today, so I did use my brain, I think, for this. Hopefully the results come out okay. Let's have a look. Block percentage versus minutes per game. How did it go? There were said 288 players from 21-22 to 24-25. The R correlation, the Pearson coefficient, is a negative 0.22, which is actually a very sort of similar number to the number we got overall in terms of comparing usage to effective field goal percentage. It's a weak to moderate negative correlation, meaning that as your block percentage or as your minutes rise, your block percentage gets lower. So with an R squared of 0.05, which is literally exactly the same. Now, an R squared of 0.05 suggests that 5% of this change is to do with the impact of minutes on block rate. So it's not a huge thing, right? It is still showing a really strong, or not strong, it is showing a meaningful correlation between these numbers. It's not a 0.7 or negative 0.7. Like you to say like that, man, yeah, you just play more, it goes down without any question. But the general trend across almost 300 players is that you play more and you will see the block rate drop. Again, this is not everybody. This is not the situation where we see that it impacts every player to the same degree. For example, if I look at the leading shot blockers in terms of block rate from last season, we can even ignore someone like Isaiah Jackson because he barely played last season, but like Rob Williams is a negative 0.15. Okay. Daniel Gafford, interestingly enough, has a positive correlation of 0.66. So Gafford, the more minutes he plays, the better his block rate is. That's a little weird. Goga Badadze, 0.63. The more minutes he plays, the better his block rate. Isaiah Stewart, negative 0.96. So basically a completely straight line that he plays fewer minutes, or he plays more minutes, he blocks fewer shots. Like that's almost a 1-to-1 ratio. Anthony Davis is like 0.09. So it's really not related at all. Mitchell Robinson, 0.1. Really not related at all. Miles Turner, 0.44. Okay, that's a positive. More minutes for Turner, more block rate. Okay, that's weird. Brook Lopez, 0.71. All right, more minutes for Brook, more higher block rate. It's a little bit all over the place, but the general prevailing number is a negative 0.22, meaning that there is a small drop. And I think when we look at this from a fantasy point of view, and again, the takeaways from all of this stuff, is that if you know a player has been, man, this guy's a great per 36 guy, and we hear that all the time, and we sort of do adjustments in our head, but I think we need to do more of it. He's a great per 36, look at his numbers. But if he goes, like a Peyton Watson, Dayron Sharp, if they start playing more minutes, and they're forced into a larger role, then we do need to discount some of those stats, particularly that block rate, and probably drop it down a little bit. Much like I did with the usage and efficiency, I tried to split it up into different groups. So if I look at the top 25 players from block rate last season, and then looked at how that correlated out with minutes, you will notice that the highest block rate players, there is no correlation at all. A 0.01 correlation across the top 25 shot blockers in block rate. Meaning, over the last 4 years, for those top 25 players, it didn't matter. Like, it's absolutely not related at all. For the top 75 guys, it was a negative 0.18. So, again, that's more important. But you all notice that the total number was a negative 0.22. Meaning that a lot of the influence of that is due to the guys that don't block as many shots. And for reference, a top 75 in block rate is about a 2.7% block number. So everyone else, the other 210 guys, are low block players, and they are having an overall influence on this number. So I would say, and we'll come back and talk a little bit more about this in a second, is that the idea that I had, the hypothesis that I had of the shot blockers who play more minutes, they drop their block rates, they're staying out of foul trouble, I would say that overall, that's probably not true. Not that it's not true, because this is something that I think people fall into a trap of a lot. Like, me saying it's not true doesn't mean that the opposite is true. It just means that you can't rely upon that as a data set. You can't say with a significant level of confidence that the high-level shot blockers are necessarily going to drop because they play more minutes. As a general rule across this sample of almost 300 players, yes, it's a negative 0.22. It's a weak correlation. But when we're talking about the higher-end guys, the guys who are going to be more important from us from a fantasy point of view in the blocks category, it doesn't really seem to matter that much, which is not, it's not really what I was expecting in this thing. Now, I've got more data to get into with this in a sec. We'll come back. Today's episode, though, is brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever wish that managing your money felt easier with Monarch Money? It can, whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase. Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building your wealth. When you are tracking your spending, you can see so many weird things that pop up. Sometimes it's hard to see that on a micro perspective. But when you're taking the macro view, which is what Monarch Money can do, it shows you the areas that you can cut back and save and invest to build your wealth. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com. The code is LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. All right, so I guess done and dusted. That's the data. Not really, because I want to dig into this just a little bit more. And let's just take a look at those top 25 players, the top 25 block rate guys. And I'll use the top 25 players on block rate from 21, 22, 22, 23, 24, 23, 24, 24, 25. And you'll notice that it's very much the same. The only one that is different is if I use the top 25 shot blockers from the 21-22 season, the R value is negative 0.15. So that one does have an impact. Okay. But the last 3 seasons, no impact at all. Plus 0.05, negative 0.03, plus 0.01. So basically, it's that graph. You would have seen it as like a meme or a GIF of the X and Y axis with a bunch of dots just wobbling around saying no correlation at all. It's basically what it's saying. If you're a high-level shot blocker, it doesn't really matter. You can find extreme examples going either direction up the top here. Like we can look at, like I said, Anthony Davis and look at the correlation for him across that time. It's like 0.09. Like doesn't correlate really at all. If you look at Jaren Jackson, his is a negative 0.75. So that's almost that's a really strong negative. The more he plays, the fewer minutes fewer shots he blocks. You look at Miles Turner, that's a 0.436. Like these are all numbers which are, really sort of interesting in terms of just giving, there are individual players, and we always look to this with individual players, but as a general rule, the top level shot blockers, it doesn't really seem to make a difference, which is not how I thought this would go. If we look at the top 75 guys, again, so we're going from those top level players down to, if I look at the 75th player in terms of what his block percentage was last season, it was 2.6%. And that's that mark in that area. That's Jaden McDaniels, Jalen Johnson, Zach Collins, Delano Banton, Larry Nance, Derek White, Moses Brown, in that area of players. That's around number 75. And if we take that number and look at the top 75 guys over the last 4 years, you'll notice again, there's a similarity in these numbers. Using the 21-22 data, which seems to be a weirdly outliery year, that was a negative 0.27. 22-23 is a negative 0.2, then a negative 0.14 for 23-24, and a negative 0.18. All around that 0.2, 0.818 mark, right? So a weak to moderate negative correlation between block percentage and minutes. If you're a top 25 player, then we're talking about no correlation. If you're in the top 75, then we get into more of a correlation. So, yeah, when we're talking about the best of the best, and again, this is actually very similar to how we looked at usage and efficiency. The best of the best, this impact of minutes doesn't seem to apply that much. The next grouping down, that's when the impact is. Those guys that you look at and go, oh, if only they could play more minutes, then it would be really good. We'd see some improvements here, or everything that they do holds. But it tends to be not the case. It's not a strong. It's not a negative 0.8. It's not a negative 0.7. It's a weak correlation. So your general leaning on a player like that should be, I expect it drops a little bit. And there's always going to be individual outliers. But again, it's showing that it's not an overriding factor. It's not the most important factor. It's a factor. And it impacts the middle class versus the top end guys at that particular number, which I think is worth noting. The other thing we wanted to test with this was what the impact of age would be. So as you get older, does your block rate decrease? Not really relating to minutes, but relating to age. So what is your block percentage as the age goes? So my expectation with this was the older you get, the block rate drops for many reasons. You're playing more minutes, you're more responsible, you're less athletic. Not really. Honestly, just no. All the R number across all players, negative 0.08. So basically 0. For the top 25 players, negative 0.04. No correlation. That's just nothing. It doesn't change really at all. And I think that's incredibly, I don't know if interesting is the right word. It is pretty interesting that it just didn't really make a difference. Of course, there are limitations to all of this data because there's probably, I think athleticism really does peak around 2021 and then drops. But there could be arguments made that you could peak your athleticism at 24 and then it start to drop. So it should be going up and then down. And we've got a different age range of guys here. But I think that, again, just as we don't need to be too granular. The granularity part in fantasy and projecting is looking at each individual player in each individual context. We have broad, sweeping generalizations or narratives or thought processes that we can apply when we're trying to do probabilities of how something will go. What is the likelihood that this player blocks fewer shots or blocks more shots? Well, he's playing more minutes, but is he a guy that plays or blocks more shots? We're never going to know. Like I always say, I am always going to be wrong. Every single time I'll be wrong. No, I'll always be wrong on projecting a player who has a shooting jump of 15 percentage points. Because I would never in a million years project a player to do that. So if a player, Christian Brown, decides that they're going to shoot 20% percentage points better from the line and 15 percentage points better from 2, I will just be wrong. Because I will never look at a player and go, I pick you to be the outlier shooting guy this season. I will never predict that. Right? It will never happen in a million years. Having these sort of general probability type rules and narratives that we can prove or bust, I think gives us a better overview of how to approach players, how to approach a new season, how to approach handicapping guys and new teams and new situations and how things adjust during the year. I like to do in the off season, that's why I'm doing it now, a lot of research. It's not like I'm not here as an academic publishing papers. Maybe I should. With this sort of research stuff, I'd need to do a lot more work on it. But I think that the way that we approach things, or I approach things on this show and you listen to it, so I hope you enjoy it, is that I like to push the boundaries of what we do in fantasy, of push the idea versus he's a dog. How good is he? Yeah, he just wants it more. Because that stuff's nonsense. It doesn't mean anything. Because I can give you narratives for anything on both sides of it. Every time. Nah, he's going to be so awesome. He's back in his hometown with his friends, man. It's really going to love it. And then I'll get, he's back now in his hometown with his friends and everyone demands tickets off him every day, so he's under pressure and doesn't perform. You can always find an angle for anything to prove it when there's no data behind it. So that's why I do all these things. That's why we do the year-to-year correlations of stats. So I can tell you, hey, if someone's got high steals, expect them to drop because that is what steals do. If someone is a high assist player, they're going to have high turnovers. That is the general rule. And we like to apply those generalities versus trying to pull stuff out of our asses. So that's why I do this stuff. And these are two new things that I've added. The usage versus efficiency and the blocks versus minutes versus age. Because they're things that I talk about a lot. And I'm just not sure whether they're things that necessarily have happened. And I think we've proven that they sort of do, but it only matters in certain areas. And I believe that information is actually pretty useful. We are going to chuck one little bonus thing in here. and this is just a little bonus bit of research that I did that's not really related to blocks at all. What I wanted to look at is standard fantasy leagues are 12 teams, 156 players. Although now on Yahoo, for some reason, their standard is 10, which I absolutely hate. Going incredibly shallow on leagues with 10 starters and 3 bench and 10 teams is just such a dumb move. It is so stupid, and I'll probably have a show describing why that is stupid and how that impacts and increases luck factor versus skill factor in fantasy leagues. I hate it that that's the case. But I'm still going to treat leagues defaults as 12s. So that's 156 players rostered, and then you have your injured slots, and that can jump it up to 175, 180. We talk a lot about what the most important factors are, and we've proven this time and time again for points leagues, that the most important things are minutes, usage, and scoring. If you have players with high usage, high minutes, and high scoring, you are going to have high fantasy points. That is just how that works. That has been proven time and time again. If you're ever in a doubt as to who to pick, go, who do I think will get more usage, or more minutes, or score more? That stuff is proven all the time. Even in category leagues, the idea of usage is not a super strong correlation to category value. Minutes are a really high, strong correlation. What I wanted to check was, and I don't know why this thought even came into my brain, but it did. What I wanted to check was what would happen, like how important is it that a player starts? Because you hear it, you hear people talk about, well, this, and people like us and fantasy analysts, it's so annoying he's not starting. My issue with not starting is that it limits the upper ceiling limit and it actually drops the floor, because if a player that's starting ahead of that guy starts to play well, the guy that would normally come in to replace him doesn't get to come in as early. And we know that coaches are, well, he's playing well, I can't take him out now. Coaches love doing that. And when you're given the starting spot, you're given the extra benefit of the doubt. Oh, he's out there, I don't want to break it up. Maybe he turns it around. All right, that's always, I feel like there's a 2 to 3 minute flip versus starting versus not. Malik Monk. Who knows? Malik Monk might be on a different team now, and I have no idea what Sacramento continues to do. Anyway, irrespective of that. What I wanted to see was how important was starting in terms of providing fantasy value. Not minutes, just being a starter. I wanted to find that out. I wanted to see what the result would be, because I don't know that data's been done before either. So, I looked at players and the percentage of the games that they played, using a per game basis, using Durant category rankings. What sort of players, or how important was it to be a starter? Here's your answers. 36 players in the top 156 per game rankings from last season. 36 of 156. 156 being your default player pool, 12 team leagues, 13-man rosters. 36 of the top 156 started under 70% of their games, which of course means that 120 of them started 70% or more. If I cut that number to 50%, 23 of the top 156, meaning 133 players, didn't fall into this category. But 23 of the top 156 started under half of the games they played. Meaning 133 out of 156 started over half the games they played. Is that definitive? I think so. I think it's pretty definitive. Now, I think that, again, intuitively, we know that. Starting tends to mean more minutes, tends to mean better players, tends to mean better fantasy outcomes. But again, when we come to draft time, when we come to trades, when we come to making decisions about free agency pickups, it's very easy to look in. Well, it's not very easy. I hope to make it easy by doing a lot of the work and providing what I find to you that makes it a little bit easier to see. But if you want to just look at an easy way to look at things, one of the easy ways to look at it is just who's getting the minutes. The next thing is who's the starter. Like, who starts? That becomes the important thing. Now, it's not infallible, obviously, because you're going to have players, and I'll go through a couple of names in a second, who can be good without starting, or start and aren't. Who do you think? There were 2 top 100 players last season, according to my Durant rankings, who didn't start 50% of their games. One of them, the top-ranked player, was the 88th best guy, and that was Tari Neverseason. 28% of his games, Tari Eason started. The other top 100 player was Russell Westbrook, who started 48% of his games. The other guys in the top 156 were Grant Williams, Peyton Pritchard, Naz Reid, Bob Portis, Santi Aldama, Matisse Thybulle, DeAndre Hunter, Quentin Grimes, but we know that Grimes was there because when he started, he played like double the minutes. Najee Marshall, again, all fueled by the games that he started. Dante DiVincenzo, Ben Simmons, Scottie Pippen, Jonas Valanciunas, Keon Ellis, Alex Caruso, Royce O'Neal, Rob Williams, Lonzo Ball, Jordan Clarkson, Jeremy Sohan, and Karis LeVert. That's the list of the 23 players in the top 156 who started under 50% of their games. Okay? So that's, there's some interesting enough names there, but most of those guys, Aldama, Portis, Reed, I'd even say Westbrook, Alice, Sohan, DiVincenzo, Marshall, Grimes, and probably even Hunter, the value that they accumulated as a starter is what put them there. And the games they played off the bench, they weren't as useful. So even though they finished in the top 156, starting under 50% of their games, if they didn't start those games that they started, it wouldn't matter. They wouldn't have been in that discussion. The only true sort of players there who were true bench guys, who just never started really at all, was Peyton Pritchard, who started like 4% of games. Alex Caruso, who barely ever started, and Lonzo Ball, who barely ever started. And he was barely in that mix. Even Jordan Clarkson. What I want to look at now, lastly, and this is where I think it's even more interesting, is that which players started every one of their games. Well, we won't even do every one of their games. Let's do it 90%. Which players started at least 90% of their games and didn't finish inside the top 156? So who started 90% plus of games but couldn't be a top 150 player? There's about 20 names. Klay Thompson, Mike Conley, Andrew Nembhard, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Grade A Dick, Yves Messi, Taurean Prince, Dylan Brooks, Kyle Kuzma, Zach Ricochet, The Pencil, Harrison Barnes. I don't have the sound queued up, but I'll get it. Barnesy. Bismack Biyombo, Taylor Hendricks, Josh Green, Jalen Wells, and Tim Hardaway Jr. That's it. That's the names that started 90% of their games and weren't top 150 players. And only 5 of those were top 200. Klay, Conley, Nembhard, KCP, and Dick. So, is starting important? It appears to be. It appears to be pretty important. Because even some of those guys who weren't starting games, the only reason they were there is the games that they started fueled them. So, a little bit of a bonus correlation for you on that show. So we've looked at blocks and minutes and usage and efficiency and starting. Just a few little extra arrows to add to our fantasy quiver. And if you're quivering at the thought of my voice, hit the thumb up on the video, subscribe. Never miss a show. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.